Emily, is Grandpa behaving himself? Oh, yes. Well, kind of. Injuring his leg. Old people can be such a nuisance. I wish they'd think about those of us who have to take care of them. Patricia, that's not a nice way to say it. It's fine. He's already declining quite a bit. I can't handle the fuss of old people, but you're used to it, so you'll be fine. The other day, my husband's grandfather, Michael, fell in the garden and injured his leg. It's not a serious injury, but he's already 82 years old. Because of his age, we're having him rest in bed just to be safe, so it doesn't get worse. My mother-in-law won't even go near him, let alone take care of him. I'm Emily, 30 years old. I married 3 years ago and live with my husband Daniel's family. My husband was my boss at the company where I worked, a company founded by his grandfather. When I joined 8 years ago, my father-in-law was already the president, and my grandfather-in-law was the chairman. But back then, the grandfather was still handling all the important tasks and responsibilities of the company. 2 years ago, when Grandpa turned 80, he remained chairman, but handed over most of the public duties to my father-in-law. Michael, you've worked hard all this time. Now leave the company matters to Christopher and take it easy. My mother-in-law said with a smile, but her words sounded sarcastic to me. Grandfather-in-law is a bit stubborn, but a fair and kind person with a good reputation. In contrast, my father-in-law seems somewhat immature, never expressing his opinions clearly and utterly unreliable compared to Grandpa. And he always does whatever my mother-in-law says. My grandmother-in-law has already passed away, and I never met her. My husband and I started dating when we worked together on the same product planning team 3 years after I joined the company. My husband, who was energetically leading the team, seemed reliable to me, though a bit self-righteous. Maybe I felt that way because I lost my father early and grew up with just my mother. My mother also passed away from illness 2 years ago, and now I have no family other than my in-laws. Shortly after I got married, my mother fell ill and needed care, so I quit my job to take care of her. The fact that my husband's family didn't object was probably due to a single comment from Grandpa. It's only natural to take care of the mother who raised you alone. Don't worry and take good care of her. Thanks to that, I was able to be by my mother's side every day for a year without financial worries until she passed away. My mother-in-law seemed a bit dissatisfied, but I was truly grateful. However, since Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law, everyone's attitudes towards him has gradually changed. They no longer listen to his opinions as much. And I can't shake the feeling that they're treating him carelessly. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but watching my mother-in-law and husband's behavior, I can't help but feel that way. My father-in-law's attitude is non-committal, but it feels like he's ignoring Grandpa, as if he's no longer needed since he's practically retired. Watching my in-laws' behavior, I feel somewhat angry. Hey, don't you think your attitude, Patricia, and yours too, is a bit cold towards Grandpa? So what's the big deal? Grandpa tries to talk to you and you barely respond. You don't even try to help him. Like I have time to deal with old people. You can take care of Grandpa. You're the one with the free time. You don't have to talk like that. Quiet. I'm tired from work. Don't nag me about unnecessary things. This is how it goes. No matter what I say, they won't listen to me. My grandfather-in-law doesn't say anything to his family about this. Now I'm the only one who talks to my grandfather-in-law at home. Grandpa, the weather is nice today. Shall we go for a little walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well, and I think it will be good rehabilitation.
Thank you. Let's go out for a bit then.
When the two of us went to the park, there were several families with children playing around. My grandfather-in-law looked at the scene with joy.
Christopher and Daniel had times like that too.
Grandpa?
I was busy with work and couldn't take care of the children much. Maybe that's why I couldn't raise Christopher and Daniel properly.
My grandfather-in-law said with a slightly sad face, almost like he was talking to himself. Christopher is my father-in-law, and Daniel is my husband. I think about how everyone can be kinder to my grandfather-in-law, but I can't come up with a good idea. But then my in-laws suggested building a house for my grandfather-in-law. This house is over 50 years old, right? The layout is bad. It's hard to use, but instead of spending money on repairs, it would be better to build a new house in a more convenient location.
A new house?
Michael is getting older, and it's good that he only got injured last time, but we never know what will happen. So let's make the house barrier-free so we won't have trouble if care is needed.
I see.
We can even put Michael's room in the middle so everyone can take care of him easily.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Right, so it's settled then. And Michael, about the cost?
If it's a house for all of us, I'll take care of it. Talk to Mr. Jones about the money.
Typical Michael. Thank you, we appreciate it. My mother-in-law smiled happily. It seems to me that they only flatter him when they want money. But if everyone takes care of my grandfather-in-law after moving to the new house, I thought there could be nothing better. Mr. Jones is the company's in-house counsel and also manages my grandfather-in-law's personal assets. My grandfather-in-law liked his character and made him in-house counsel, and it's been nearly 30 years. He's 58 now and the person my grandfather-in-law trusts the most. I've met him several times, and he seems to be a very honest person. He always cares about my grandfather-in-law's health, and sometimes I think he's more like a son than his real sons. Having such people around my grandfather-in-law makes me feel a little relieved. I wasn't informed about where or what kind of house was being built, but my mother-in-law seemed very cheerful, and the three of them were looking at interior design magazines and discussing various things, so it seemed to be going smoothly. Then something unexpected happened. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $1,820,000. Wait, what's this about $1,820,000? My grandfather-in-law had become a co-signer for a loan for a friend's company. But that company was in trouble, and the debt had become my grandfather-in-law's responsibility. Wait, they're not going to take the house that's under construction, are they?
Since the contract has already been completed, and as Patricia said, it's in the president's name, so it's fine.
My mother-in-law seemed relieved at those words. Oh, thank goodness, I'm glad we did it my way. Listening to that conversation, I learned for the first time that the house was in my father-in-law's name. Even though my grandfather-in-law had paid for it, putting it in my father-in-law's name seemed just like something my mother-in-law would do. I also wondered why they didn't think of giving up the house to help repay the debt. Hey, this debt is Michael's fault, and it has nothing to do with us or the company, right?
Well, it was signed in Michael's name.
Oh, good. Then there's no problem. I couldn't understand what was good about it. But since my grandfather-in-law didn't say anything during that conversation, I didn't intervene either. After all, it's not an amount I could handle. And a few days later, my grandfather-in-law's behavior began to change gradually. Grandpa, what would you like to eat for lunch?
Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50. You have no right to call me that.
Huh?
Sorry, Emily. Right, I was lost in thought.
At first I thought he was just deep in thought, but when it happened repeatedly, I began to feel uneasy.
Patricia, what are you doing? Where's my meal?
Grandpa, I'm Emily. Patricia is your daughter-in-law. You ate your meal earlier.
I didn't eat. Are you trying to starve me?
I wondered if my grandfather-in-law's condition was triggered by the $1,820,000 debt. And seeing that none of his family members were trying to help him might have been a double shock. What can I do for him? I tried to take my grandfather-in-law to the hospital, but he refused to go. He might not want to admit that he might have dementia. I don't want to force him, but I can't do anything on my own. I consulted my husband, but he only replied that it had nothing to do with him. I can't rely on my mother-in-law either. So I thought my father-in-law was the only option.
Yeah, I heard from Patricia and Daniel. They think it might be dementia.
Can you go to the hospital with us?
But it's not that bad yet, right? If we go to the hospital, others will find out. My father having dementia?
There are good medications now that can slow the progression.
Well, there's no need to rush. Let's watch him a little longer. Emily is here, so it'll be fine, right?
I can't help but think how unreliable these people are. I can't depend on them. Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Let's get you properly examined.
Who are you? Where are you planning to take me? You're up to no good.
I almost cry, thinking about how my once kind grandfather-in-law has become so stubborn. But my mother-in-law just laughs, amused. Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. But now everything, even the company, is all Christopher's. Patricia, Grandpa isn't completely unaware. He's listening to everything. He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering, dribbling. Just thinking about it gives me chills. He's nothing but a nuisance now. How can you say that? Grandpa has worked hard for the family all his life. My mother-in-law's words make me angry and sad. But my grandfather-in-law just smiles. See? This old man doesn't understand anything. Patricia! I'm furious at my mother-in-law's laughing in words. But soon, the new house will be ready. Things might change once we move there. Since it's a house that Grandpa built, the family might show some gratitude and be kind to him. I couldn't completely abandon that faint hope. And 2 months later, the house was finally built. For days, I had been forced to pack my in-laws' and husband's belongings, while my father-in-law's and my things were mostly untouched. Even when I tried to pack my things, my in-laws and husband kept giving me tasks, so I couldn't make any progress. But I thought it would be fine to move the small things later, since this house wasn't going away. On moving day, after moving most of the things, I went to call my father-in-law, but my husband said, "Ah, you and Grandpa can stay here." "What?" "You can stay in this house. We don't need any extra baggage in the new house. In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on, and I'll give you Grandpa's debt too." "Well, you can at least be a housekeeper." "Hey, let's go." "Yeah, I'm coming. Good luck with all the debt repayment and live in care." With those words, my in-laws cheerfully got into the car and left. I was stunned for a while. I couldn't immediately understand what had just happened. Were we just abandoned? And not just me, but my grandfather-in-law too. Only they would live in the new house? It took me a while to understand, because it was beyond my imagination that someone could do something so cruel. How should I explain this to my grandfather-in-law? I slowly returned to the back room. I don't mind taking care of my grandfather-in-law at all. That was my intention from the start. As I was about to timidly call out to him, who was sitting with his back to me, he seemed to sense my presence and turned around before I could speak. "Have they gone already?" My grandfather-in-law's expression, as he said that, looked completely different from the dazed look he had just months ago. To be frank, he seemed like a different person. I thought maybe a different symptom had emerged, but the next moment, my grandfather-in-law smiled. And then, his following words surprised me. As I was talking to my grandfather-in-law, Mr. Jones came. "Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff?" "Yes, it's all done. Let's go, shall we?" Where are we going?" "Of course, to the new house." I left the house where I had been living, led by my grandfather-in-law, without understanding what was happening. The next month, countless calls came from my mother-in-law and husband. My grandfather-in-law said he wouldn't deal with them anymore, but I answered my husband's call because of the divorce.
Hey, Emily, is Grandpa with you? When I went to the old house, it was for sale. It's not worth $1,820,000, so you can't repay the debt. Is that why you did that?
What do you mean?
Put Grandpa on. Dad said he can't get in touch at all. That forgetful old man has done something outrageous.
I knew what he was talking about, but I wanted to hear what my husband would say.
Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director. Thanks to that, the executive director became the largest shareholder. And a shareholders' meeting and board meeting were held, and Dad was dismissed as president.
But the executive director is well liked, and maybe Grandpa thought he was better to hand over the company to.
The executive director must have deceived the senile old man into selling the stocks. This is invalid.
You seem to be misunderstanding something. But Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he seems more coherent than before.
What?
I, too, until that moving day, had seriously thought that my grandfather-in-law had dementia. It seems that my grandfather-in-law had been suspicious from the time my mother-in-law said she would build a house to live with him. So he devised a plan. He pretended to have dementia to see how my in-laws and husband would react. As expected, they showed their true colors one after another. In the end, they left my grandfather-in-law and me behind.
I struggled to hold back my laughter because everything went exactly as I expected,
my grandfather-in-law said. I was surprised, relieved, and a little conflicted.
To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies.
He laughed. He seemed to have been getting regular updates on the company from the executive director and Mr. Jones. With my grandfather-in-law gone, my father-in-law and husband did as they pleased, self-righteous, completely ignoring the opinions of the employees, constant entertaining at the company's expense. He handed over the company to my father-in-law, but he was worried about the future, so he took this measure. In the end, he decided he couldn't entrust it to his son and left it to the executive director.
What about the $1,820,000 debt?
That's gone now. Indeed, my grandfather-in-law had been a guarantor for a friend's debt, but he also owned personal assets that exceeded that. After stepping back from the company's operations, he had invested in real estate and made a considerable profit. So there was no problem at all. But if I had said that, it was clear that my mother-in-law and husband would target it. That's why I only talked about the debt. The friend was the son of a benefactor who had helped my father-in-law when he was young. Moreover, since then, the countryside land that the son owned was going to be developed into a resort, and he was able to sell it at a high price, so there was no need to take on the debt.
You're kidding.
But more importantly, are you guys okay?
We're not okay. Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?
Well, there's also the mortgage on the house.
What? What do you mean, the mortgage on the house?
Huh? Haven't you realized it yet?
The house money should have been all paid by Grandpa.
Maybe you don't remember what Grandpa said at that time. When my mother-in-law talked to my grandfather-in-law about the money, he had set the condition that if it's a house where everyone, including me, will live. In other words, if that wasn't the case, he wouldn't pay. Even if the house was in my father-in-law's name, my grandfather-in-law intended to pay if everyone was living together. That's just because you assumed Grandpa would pay and didn't look at the documents properly, right? Christopher signed without checking everything. It shows he really didn't have the qualities of a president.
You're kidding.
Afterward, my parents-in-law ended up losing the house they had built because they couldn't pay the mortgage. Now they live in an old apartment over 50 years old and are struggling to pay off the unpaid loan. My mother-in-law and husband have been contacting me alternately, saying we should all live together, but that's impossible now. My grandfather-in-law has retired from his chairman position, and now he has bought an old house in the countryside, and we are living together.
Emily, you can go and live wherever you like freely. You don't have to worry about living expenses.
My grandfather-in-law told me, but I chose to be with him. If I'm not in the way, please let me be with you. When I said that, my grandfather-in-law's eyes welled up with tears. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized and procedures were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and former husband from inheritance, and I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter. If anything happens to my grandfather-in-law, who has become my father, I intend to take care of him until the end. Now the two of us enjoy working in the fields together. Dad, look at this radish. It's big. In the pouring sunlight, warm moments flow. I wish for these days to continue even one day longer.
Oh, welcome home. Huh? When I returned home from work, the person who was there was my ex-husband, who disappeared 3 years ago. You're always late. Making your husband wait? Man, I'm starving. Is dinner ready yet? As if it was perfectly normal, my ex-husband barged into my house and brazenly made these comments. In my mind, memories from 3 years ago were resurfacing. The image of my ex-husband who dumped all the household chores on me, shouted at me unfairly, stood me up on our wedding anniversary trip and disappeared. And now, he was right before my eyes. The man I despised from the bottom of my heart was now right in front of me. The voice that came out of my mouth was surprisingly cold. Who are you? Huh? He was just staring at me, looking surprised. My name is Hazel. I'm turning 30 this year. These days, I lead a peaceful life as a company employee, but I have a past. That is about my husband Steve, whom I married when I was 25. I met Steve through a friend's introduction. He, a salesperson, had a manly character, the exact opposite of my quiet and reserved self. I felt something that I didn't have in myself and was drawn to him. So we started dating. In the second year of dating, I accepted a marriage proposal from Steve. After we registered our marriage, we started our married life in an apartment that my parents gave us as a wedding gift. Everything was fine until then. After getting married, Steve's attitude changed drastically. During our dating, he used to speak kindly to me and gave me presents. But after marriage, he stopped doing all that. On top of that, even though we both worked, he made me do all the housework. He left his dirty laundry all over the place, left trash scattered around, and wouldn't even thank me for preparing meals. He even refused to do minor chores like taking out the trash. After living with him for about a month, I reached my limit and decided to talk to Steve one day. Hey Steve, we're both working. Can't you help a little with the housework? Then Steve let out a sigh, as if he was tired. You know we're married, right, Hazel? Yeah, but it's common sense that the wife does the housework after marriage. I couldn't hide my surprise at Steve's outrageous words. That's not true. These days it's common for both parties to share the workload. What? You're trying to make your husband work at home too? You're such a nagging wife. A nagging wife? If you don't want to be called that, you better do your job properly. With that, Steve started watching TV. I couldn't say anything and could only continue doing the housework. A year passed since our marriage, and I got completely used to doing all the housework by myself. Steve started saying, I'm busy with work, and coming home late and even working on weekends. There were days when I realized we hadn't had a decent conversation for 2 weeks. One day, when he happened to come home early, I hesitantly started a conversation with him. Hey Steve, are you still busy with work? Yeah, kind of. You've been coming home after midnight recently, and you don't seem to have any days off. Maybe it's better if you change your job. Stay out of my business! Steve suddenly yelled, surprising me and making me step back in shock. I'm sorry. I just worry about your health. You don't need to say unnecessary things. Leave me. From that point on, Steve started a pattern of returning home late, sleeping, then leaving early in the morning. We hadn't done anything together for months, like going out on weekends. At this rate, our relationship will fall apart. I have to do something. I was filled with feelings similar to anxiety. As I was racking my brains, I came up with a plan. I asked him as he returned home, "Hey, Steve, isn't our anniversary during the upcoming holidays?" "Yeah, I guess," he replied gruffly as he removed his tie. Not discouraged, I proposed, "Keep that day free. Let's go on a trip together." "A trip?" "Yes, wouldn't it be nice? I'll cover the costs. Please?" "I see." Steve thought about it for a while, then finally agreed. "All right, I'll keep the day free." "That's great. I'll plan everything." And so Steve and I decided to go on a trip for our anniversary. I hoped this trip could rekindle our bond that had been gradually fading. With this in mind, I researched thoroughly and made our travel arrangements. A few weeks later, the day of the trip arrived. Steve hadn't returned home since he went to work the day before. Our departure was scheduled for 10 a.m., and time was quickly running out. I called him repeatedly in a panic, but I couldn't reach him. Finally, in the afternoon, Steve called. "Hello? We're supposed to go on a trip today, right? Where are you?" I asked.
Sorry. Work is running late."
"We have a check-in time. We should leave soon."
"Can you go ahead and check in for us? I'll catch up."
"Really? You're actually coming, right?"
"I told you I would. Bye."
The call ended abruptly, and I was left dumbfounded. The check-in time was approaching, and I needed to leave immediately. I really wanted to check in with Steve and explore the area together after arriving. But despite my thoughts, I headed to our destination alone. When I checked into the hotel, they seemed surprised to see me alone. Naturally, as I'd made a reservation for 2, I explained that my husband would be arriving later and was then shown to our room. Outside the window, it had started to rain, as if reflecting my feelings. For a while, I stayed in, waiting for Steve's arrival. But even after 1 hour, 2 hours, he didn't show up. Worse yet, he didn't even call. At this rate, the dinner reservation we had made would go by. After several unsuccessful attempts to call Steve, I was only connected to voicemail. In the end, I swallowed my embarrassment and had them make me a dinner for 1, which I ate alone. The meal was lavishly prepared with spirit, but no matter what I tasted, I couldn't find its flavor. My vision blurred repeatedly with tears. When asked by the hotel staff what to do with the cake adorned with a happy anniversary plate, all I could say was, "Please discard it." That day, I ended up staying at my travel destination alone. Although I had a sightseeing tour planned for the next day, I canceled it and hurried home. At that time, I thought something might have happened to Steve. "I'm home. Steve, are you back?" Entering the house, the room was silent, with no sign of anyone. As I dropped my luggage and glanced at the dining table, something had been placed there. It was a divorce paper, signed by Steve, and our wedding ring. What? What is this? What is going on? I searched for a letter but found nothing. Looking around the house, all his belongings were gone, and it was clear that they had been moved out. I was so stunned that all I could do was sit down on the spot. When I came to my senses, I immediately contacted my mother-in-law. She lived far away, and we had only met a few times, but she was a kind woman who treated me kindly. When I explained the situation, my mother-in-law was also astounded. There was no report from him, and he didn't seem to have come to his parents' house. When I called Steve's office after the holiday, I was told a shocking fact.
"Mr. Smith resigned last month."
What?
"We've been trying to reach him too, but we haven't been able to get through since yesterday. Could you please tell him to contact us as soon as possible?"
I ended my call with Steve's workplace in a daze. Next, I pulled out my cell phone and called Steve. But all I heard from the phone was, "The number you dialed is currently not in use." And so Steve vanished abruptly one day. After going through various processes, I submitted the signed divorce paper and forcibly ended our married life. Time passed, and about 3 years have gone by. I have remarried and am now living a peaceful life. Of course, I was initially distraught, but now I hardly ever think about my ex-husband. It's true what they say, time heals all wounds. As usual, when I came home alone after work, I noticed something. The lights in the house were on. That's odd. Did I forget to turn off the lights this morning? As I reached for the doorknob, I noticed that the front door was unlocked. What's more, there was a pair of ragged men's sneakers that I didn't recognize at the entrance. A wave of tension ran through me, and I was about to pull out my cell phone to call the police. There appeared a familiar face at the entrance.
"Oh, welcome home, Hazel."
What? The person standing there was none other than Steve, my vanished ex-husband. I was surprised and speechless. Without paying any attention to me, Steve brazenly said,
"You're late coming home as usual. You've kept your husband waiting. I'm hungry. Is dinner ready yet?"
In my mind, the memories from 3 years ago came flooding back. The audacity of Steve, unloading all the household chores on me, as if it was my duty, yelling at me unreasonably, standing me up on our wedding anniversary trip, and then just disappearing off the face of the earth. Now he is standing right in front of me. The man I hate from the bottom of my heart is now right in front of me. The voice that escaped from my mouth was surprisingly icy. "Who are you?"
"Huh?"
Steve, taken aback, is staring at me. Returning his gaze sharply, I said, "Leave now or I'll call the cops."
"Whoa, wait a minute. You can't tell me you've forgotten your husband's face."
He approaches with a smug grin. Upon closer inspection, he's put on weight, let his hair and beard grow out, and looks utterly unkempt compared to 3 years ago. Holding back my growing disgust, I retorted without mercy, "Stay back. What do you mean by husband?"
"Come on, we're married, aren't we? You haven't forgotten just because we haven't seen each other for a while, have you?"
"What are you talking about? I filed for divorce a long time ago. We're strangers." At that, Steve's face looked like he had been struck by lightning. His eyes wide open and his mouth agape.
"Why would you do such a thing?"
"You left divorce papers signed by yourself, didn't you?"
"What? You took it seriously? Did you really submit it?"
I glared at the flustered Steve with a disgusted look. "Is that a problem?"
"Of course it's a problem. I didn't intend to divorce at all."
"What?"
"I thought you would wait for me. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it."
My patience had run out with Steve, who was playing the victim. "What do you mean? I thought you would wait for me? After all, it was you who abandoned everything 3 years ago to move in with your mistress, wasn't it?" When I blurted that out, Steve once again looked astonished. Soon after he disappeared, I hired a private investigator to locate him. Half a year after he left, the investigator found him, and the report I received was beyond imagination. About 6 months before he disappeared, he had been having an affair with a worker at his workplace. Apparently, their relationship was an open secret at the office. In the end, he and the other woman quit their jobs and started living together in the neighboring state. Upon hearing this, I had immediately filed for divorce, my love and affection for him completely exhausted. I had been living, trying not to recall the past, yet now he appears before me, even having the audacity to barge into my house. I deeply regretted not having changed the locks.
"No, Hazel, you've got it all wrong,"
I retorted angrily to Steve's plea. "What's there to misunderstand? I've gathered all the evidence through a PI. Go back to her."
That's not possible."
"What?"
We broke up. We've been fighting a lot recently. I don't care about her anymore, Hazel. You're the only one for me."
My ex-husband pathetically clinging to my arm. I shook him off, my face full of disgust. "I've told you, you're not my husband. How dare you dictate to me, a stranger to you?
I only love you, right? Let's start over our married life. Let's go to the city hall now and reapply for our marriage certificate. Come on, let's get moving.
Steve tugs at my arm. This is hopeless. He's not understanding a word. Just as I take out my cell phone to call the police, the front door swings open.
Who might you be? Let go of her arm, please.
Steve, taken aback, slackens his grip. I instantly run towards the source of the voice.
What the? Who are you?
My husband.
What?
I cling to the arm of my returning husband. He gently soothes me. He addresses Steve in a low voice.
You're Steve Smith, right? Hazel's ex-husband? Yes, that's me. But you? Her husband?
Stunned Steve doesn't comprehend the situation, so I lay it out for him. I've been remarried for a while now. That's why I've been telling you that you're a stranger. My new husband, John Collins, is a colleague from work. Apparently, he has been interested in me since we joined the company. At first, he gave up because I was married. But once he learned of my divorce, he started to make his move. At first, I was wary of men and didn't accept his feelings. But as I got to know John's earnest and sincere character, I gradually let him in. Upon hearing my circumstances, John looked me in the eyes and said,
I will never leave you alone, Hazel. I promise to protect you for the rest of my life. Will you please marry me?
Tearfully, I accepted his proposal, and I have been moving forward, forgetting the past.
Hazel, got remarried with another man?
Steve gawks at John and me.
Once you understand, could you kindly leave?
John's stern face makes Steve recoil. As Steve tries to flee towards the entrance, I stop him. Hold it right there. He looks back at us, trembling with fear. You're going to be paying alimony. It's not beyond the statute of limitations yet, so you will pay for your infidelity.
I'm not working now. I don't have any money.
I couldn't care less. If you don't pay, I'll take you to court. Remember that. With that, my husband next to me also glares at Steve.
You should know full well what happens when you upset her, right? I understand. I'm sorry.
With that, he runs off with his tail between his legs. In the quiet room, I apologize to my husband. I'm sorry about all this. I never thought he would show up after all this time.
It's okay. It must have shocked you too, Hazel. From now on, let me know if something happens. I'll protect you with everything I've got.
Embraced by my husband, I savored the happiness that was. Later on, it seems Steve returned to his parents' home. My former mother-in-law contacted me and agreed to pay the alimony in one lump sum. According to her, Steve will now work off his debt to her by tolling away on their family farm. I do hope the proud and selfish Steve changes his ways and works honestly. But I never want to be involved with him again. As for me, learning from this experience, I moved to a new apartment. In fact, I recently found out that I am pregnant with my current husband, who is truly happy about my pregnancy. I'm sure we'll be able to build a happy family.
I've got a business trip lined up next week. It's going to last a week. My husband announced cheerfully after coming home from work. A whole week? So far, his business trips have only lasted 2 or 3 days. 1 week seemed unusually long. This time it's abroad. Abroad? No wonder he seemed so excited. It was his first business trip overseas. Our company is planning to expand to France, and I've been chosen for the inspection. He must have landed on the fast track to promotion. Being trusted with an international project like this? Taking his words at face value, I helped him prepare diligently for the trip. My name is Alice, a 40-year-old working woman. My husband, Jake, is 42, 2 years my senior. We've been married for 10 years. Despite our efforts, we've been unable to conceive a child. 2 years into our marriage, we got tested and found that the issue was with Jake. I expressed my longing for a child, but Jake refused treatment, so we were unable to have a child. Still, we've managed to maintain a good relationship as a childless couple. make sure to bring your passport yourself. 2 days before the business trip, I told him to leave his passport, which should be in his room, in the living room. The next day, when I saw it properly placed there, I prepared a suitcase and I felt reassured. However, on the day of his departure, an incident occurred. As luck would have it, I had the day off from work and drove my husband to the train station. When I returned home and was about to turn on the TV in the living room, I noticed the passport still lying there. I was sure he nodded when I asked if he had taken the passport. Why was it still here? Could it be an old passport? I wondered, but upon opening it, that wasn't the case. I hurriedly tried to call my husband, but it seemed his phone was off. I sent him an email and waited, but still couldn't get through. I wondered what time his flight was. Maybe, just maybe, I could make it if I drove. I decided to call my husband's office. Luckily, my husband's senior colleague answered the phone. And when I explained, "My husband seems to have left something behind. Could you tell me what time his flight is?" he replied, "The flight should be around 10 o'clock. It was still before 9, and the airport was an hour's drive away. Even though I hadn't been able to reach my husband, I decided to take the passport and head to the airport. However, I still couldn't get through to him even after reaching the airport. I decided to wait a little longer and took a seat on an airport bench. In the 10 years since we were married, I'd never had a reason to doubt my husband. But he spent a lot of time away from home, claiming work or business trips, and I had no idea what he was doing during those times. This time too, if it was indeed an overseas business trip, he must have contacted me by now. Considering he didn't have his passport, could it be, was the business trip a lie? But when I had called the office earlier, it seemed like he really had gone on a business trip. What was going on? As I thought about these things, I started feeling irritated and decided to treat myself to a luxurious lunch alone before heading home. While I was having lunch, I tried to sort out my thoughts, but my suspicion that my husband might be having an affair only grew stronger. Normally, I don't enter my husband's room, but I made up my mind and opened that door. There, I found the dress shirts and business socks I was supposed to have packed in a suitcase. On his computer desk lay a diary. Feeling guilty, I picked up the diary and opened it. The date of today had business trip written on it. The destination was California. What does this mean? Why an overseas business trip? There was no information in the diary. I started up my husband's computer. Since I have a laptop that I use for work, I never use my husband's computer, so he probably never expected me to touch it. Without having to input any password, his computer started up. Looking through his emails, they all seemed to be work-related, nothing suspicious. I opened all the folders one by one, but nothing seemed to be of concern. Was I overthinking this? But something didn't add up. Suddenly, I decided to check his internet history. Then, I stumbled upon a shocking truth. Night fell, and I finally received a call from my husband.
"What's going on? You've been trying to contact me all day."
He sounded annoyed. Somehow I managed to stay calm and asked, "Where are you right now? You left something behind."
"I've just landed in France. What did I leave behind?"
At that moment, I thought I heard a woman's voice in the background, but I only conveyed the necessary information. "Your passport."
"What?"
Hearing my husband's flustered voice, I quickly lied. "Just kidding. You left behind one of your dress shirts. Can you manage with washing and such?" He sighed.
"I'm not a kid. I can manage with one less shirt."
Trying to sound as calm as possible, I said, "Right. Do your best on your trip," and hung up the phone. A week later, on the day my husband was to return home, I took the day off and waited at home. This week seemed both long and short at the same time, a strange feeling indeed. I was keeping a low profile in the living room when he came home in the evening. I was prepared to wait until midnight if necessary, as I wasn't sure what time he'd return. But he came back, earlier than expected. My husband walked into the dimly lit living room. "Welcome home." When I called out from the shadows, he was so surprised that he fell on his backside. "Alice, weren't you supposed to be at work? Turn on some lights at least." "I finished work, so I took the day off. I was so spaced out that I forgot to turn on the lights." That's what I said. But in truth, I just wanted to see his face when he returned from his trip with his mistress. "I'm sorry, I forgot to pack your shirts. I bet the laundry is piled up, right? I'll help you unpack." I tried to take his suitcase, but he pulled it away quickly. "There are some work documents in there. I'll unpack it myself. I'll take out the laundry later." With that, he retreated to his room. Of course, there were no work clothes in the suitcase that I had packed. He was clever enough to realize that, but still, why did he do such a thing? Did he take me for granted? After a while, he came out of the room carrying a large pile of laundry. Of course, he had rumpled the clothes he had left behind as if he had used them. Smiling, I took the clothes from him. I'm really sorry. There were only 5 shirts for a week-long business trip, right? Were you okay? He looked away. Yeah, I managed washing them. As he responded awkwardly, I kept cheerfully talking to him. Hey, didn't you bring any souvenirs? Then he sat down on a living room chair, distancing himself from me. I was busy, I didn't have time for that. As we talked, I prepared a beer for him. He opened the beer. I grabbed the remote and turned on a show I had recorded. Hey, this show was on the other day. Let's watch it. It's about Yosemite National Park in California. It's so beautiful. It makes me want to go. Jake, have you ever been there? He glanced at me, then quickly looked away and shook his head. Nah, I've never been to California. I feigned surprise. Really? When I said that, he nodded. Now it's my turn to counter. I shoved the screen of my smartphone in front of him. But you've been to Yosemite National Park, and the food was delicious, wasn't it? What was displayed on my phone was a blog post. When I checked his computer in his room, I found a blog that he frequently visited in his internet history. Looking at the blog, I saw a family from behind. The author of the blog seemed to be a man. Between the man and the woman, there was a young boy. If you just looked at this, you could guess it was a parenting blog. But the problem was the man. I couldn't see his face, but the clothing and stance were undoubtedly my husband's. When I saw that, I panicked and hyperventilated. After a while, I managed to calm down and search for the blog on my smartphone. I bookmarked it without hesitation. Then I opened my planner. I hadn't noted down the days my husband was working overtime, but I did write down his business trip days. Comparing those dates with the dates in the blog, almost every post contained a picture featuring my husband. According to the blog, the boy is 4 years old. When I found this, I thought maybe my husband wanted a child and was having an affair with a single mother, playing house. When I showed the screen of my smartphone to my husband, his gaze stuck to the screen, frozen. This is your blog, isn't it? My petrified husband started to wave his hands in panic. Huh? What are you talking about? What do you mean? I could tell his voice was rising, and more than anger, laughter welled up within me. I pulled out my husband's casual clothes from the laundry he had given me earlier. You wore this outfit yesterday, didn't you? Look at this picture. You're diligent, updating your blog even on a trip. I showed him another blog post. And this outfit is the same, right? To prevent him from making excuses, I had taken his clothes out of the chest of drawers. As I pulled out his clothes while comparing them with the blog, my husband seemed to give up, started to sob, and began to kneel down in apology. I'm really sorry. It was just a momentary lapse. A girl I met at a bar seemed to take a liking to me. And she said she was a single mother, so I got caught up in advising her. Oh, isn't that interesting? Taking your mistress along on a company trip? How impressive. As I looked at my husband with cold eyes, he continued without looking up. No, you've got it wrong. She wanted to go to California, and it just so happened my business trip was to Yosemite, so we met up there. Are you serious? My husband kept his head down and begged for forgiveness. It was just a moment of weakness. I'll break up with her. I won't see her again, so please forgive me. I let out a sigh. That's a cheap apology. With that, I placed the divorce papers in front of him. When he checked the divorce papers, he once again apologized dramatically. I'll pay compensation money. Don't say we're breaking up. I could only sigh. Cheating for 5 years on a whim, that's half our married life. Upon hearing those words, my husband's face changed color. I continued. So you thought if you said it was a business trip abroad, you could secure time for a family trip? Saying you're going to France but actually going to California? What's that about? At least bring your passport properly. Didn't I check whether you had your passport this morning? It seems you didn't check properly because you didn't need the passport anyway. At that, my husband looked up as if he had realized something. On the phone you said I forgot my white shirt. That's right, I heard a woman's voice from behind you and you lied to me that you were already at the destination. So I assumed you were lying about the passport. If you had realized that you really forgot your passport, you might have run away as it is. When I presented my husband's passport to him, he seemed to finally realize he had left it behind. My husband kept apologizing, but I didn't intend to let it end there. If you admit to cheating, you shouldn't have to lie. I showed him a certain investigation report and bank book. Interesting enough, my husband turned pale. You met her 5 years ago, and this child is now 4. It seems you acknowledged this child on your own, and have even been paying child support. When I found evidence of his affair in our bedroom, I immediately called my lawyer friend. She agreed to meet me that very day, so I took as many pictures as I could of my husband's diary, the clothes he wore in his blog posts, and headed to meet her. My friend agreed that he was undoubtedly having an affair and suggested that I hire a private investigator for more concrete evidence. The investigation confirmed without a doubt that the child was indeed my husband's secret offspring. After that, I went back home and checked my husband's bank book, only to be shocked once more. 60,000 yen was being deposited into the same account every month. The account holder's name was a woman's. It was probably child support. He used to complain about not getting raises, but it seems he was earning well enough. The money was just disappearing into child support. I might not have noticed if it weren't for this. We each managed our own bank accounts, and this wasn't the account we used for household expenses. I would never have seen it. My husband turned pale and couldn't utter a word. I showed no mercy. After all, you're not supposed to be able to have kids, right? Is that boy really yours? When I laughed and said this, my husband finally retorted, "That hospital's examination must have been wrong. It was your fault we couldn't have kids." Well, that doesn't matter anymore. I've left everything to my lawyer. Thanks to you being away on a business trip to France for a week, I've gathered plenty of evidence. When I said this in a sarcastic tone, he became enraged, realizing he had no way out. "I'll pay whatever compensation I owe, just get out!" I picked up the voice recorder that I had left on the kitchen counter. "Everything you lied about is recorded here. Bye." I had decided to bring up divorce, so I had recorded everything just in case. My husband was alternating between anger and panic. I didn't pay him any attention and walked out of the house with my bag. My husband watched me leave without much resistance, perhaps thinking I might return if he apologized again later. After all, as far as he could see, everything in the house remained untouched. I wonder when he'll open the door to my room. I've moved out all the necessary items, so my room is now completely empty. Thinking about this made me feel somewhat happy, and I returned to my company dorm. Later, I formally requested compensation from my husband, and the divorce was settled smoothly. Of course, I also received compensation from the woman he cheated with. My ex-husband was berated by his mistress for revealing their affair. However, he seemed troubled by something I had said, so he asked her if the child was really his. She replied candidly, "I don't know whose child it is. At the very least, you were just a cash cow." My ex-husband sent me an email detailing his side of the story, with the other woman playing the tragic hero. At first, I found it amusing, but I lost interest when I found out that he was forced to resign from his company and was living in poverty, so I blocked his emails. I have no idea what happened to him after that. I started a comfortable life in the company dorm, doing things I couldn't do while I was married, like going out for drinks leisurely and traveling with my colleagues. I'm enjoying my life.
I have a mother who lives alone. Contemplating her circumstances, I approached my husband about the idea of living closer to my mother's house. However, he flatly retorted, "We are not moving near your mother's house. We should live with my parents instead." I was shocked. He just disregarded my feelings and tried to impose his will. With a deep sense of frustration, I decided to take matters into my own hands. My name is Isabella. I'm 30 years old. I live with my husband, Mark, and our 2-month-old son, Chris. Mark and I work at the same company. Although we are in different departments, we often work together on projects, and we share a number of acquaintances. We had a grand wedding celebration with our colleagues, and I was determined to make our married life a happy one. Initially, Mark and I lived in his apartment. However, as it was quite cramped, we decided to move. We wanted to have a child eventually, so we agreed to move into a larger apartment and consider buying a house later on. Casually browsing property listings on my smartphone, I started a conversation with Mark. "I don't want to quit my job even after we have a child," I said. Mark responded with a smile. "You love your work, Isabella. You should do what you like." "But it seems that the competition for daycare spots is pretty high. We have to think about that too if I'm planning to return to work." "Well, I guess you're right. We'll figure it out somehow," Mark nonchalantly replied, fiddling with his smartphone. I then decided to bring up an idea that I had been contemplating for a while. "You know, there's something I've been wanting to talk about," I began. "Oh? What is it?" he asked. "I'd like us to live closer to my mother's house, just in case something happens." "Why would we do that?" he inquired. "Well, you know my father passed away a few years ago, so my mother is living alone now. I want to be able to rush over if something happens."
Your mother seems fine. There's no need to worry about that now.
Well, yes, but I think it's better to have someone close by who can support us when we have a child. His response was noticeably reluctant. I tried to persuade him further. If it's just the two of us raising the child, it could be quite difficult, right? If my mom is nearby, I believe it'll ease your burden, I insisted.
Nah, I can't do that.
He countered. What? Why not?
Because if we live near her mom, we'll have to see her often. That would be stressful.
I understand your concern, but I promise I'll try my best not to burden you.
When we have a child, you won't be able to work for a while, which means we'll be living on my income alone, right? So why should I have to deal with the extra stress?
Well, in response to my silence, he coldly stated,
We're not moving anywhere near your mother's house.
But, I protested.
After giving birth, you won't be able to contribute to the rent or the living expenses, right? Yet, you're the only one thinking about what's convenient for you. Don't you think that's a bit selfish?
Hold on, what kind of logic is that? Sure, I wouldn't be able to work for a few months after giving birth, but does he really need to be so negative about it? Don't you think we should try harder to cooperate as a married couple? My husband's actions didn't make any sense, and I felt that if I continued to speak up, things would not progress in a positive way. We're newlyweds. I don't want to quarrel at this point. Fine. I got it. Leaving these words behind, I left the room. I couldn't bear this atmosphere any longer. Eventually, I gave up on living near my mother's home and decided to settle in an area close to both of our workplaces. After moving, work and our marital relationship were going fairly well, and we were leading relatively peaceful days. One day, I found out I was pregnant. My work was going well, so I felt a little guilty, but my child was my top priority. Taking handovers into account, I worked up until the last possible moment before my family leave. Since I had more free time after starting my family leave, I started visiting my mother more often. My husband Mark was coming home past midnight almost every day due to overtime work. If things continued this way, I would undoubtedly have to single-handedly raise our child after giving birth. As it would be my first child, everything was new to me and I felt a lot of anxiety. One day, I was visiting my mother at home and I blurted out my real feelings to her. Mom, I'm really looking forward to the baby coming, but I'm also very anxious. What's wrong, Isabella? That's not like you. You have Mark, don't you? Mark seems busy with work, and when I asked him to take care of our baby together after giving birth, he yelled at me, saying, "How can I, a man, do that?" As I explained, my voice trembled and my mother looked worried. I decided to express my feelings clearly to my mother. "Hey, Mom, can I come back here for a while after the baby is born?" "Well," my mother tilted her head and thought for a moment. "It's going to be tough at first, and it would be a bit of a hassle for me to commute to your place every day. I would be grateful if you could come over to our house, Isabella." "Really? Can I stay?" "Of course. I'd be happy to spend time with my grandchild, and nothing would make me happier than being able to support my daughter." "Thank you, Mom. I'll talk to Mark about it when I get home today." By revealing my anxiety to my mother, my heart felt significantly lighter. Right, I should talk to Mark properly. As a couple, we need to consider our child's future carefully. That night, I talked to Mark about the situation with my mother. However, his reaction was not what I was hoping for. "What? Go back to your parents' house? You must be kidding." "I'm serious." I leaned forward trying to convince my husband. "I'm nervous because it's my first time, and I need to rest for a month after giving birth. I don't think I'll be able to do the housework. That's why I want to go back to my mother's house for a while." "That's ridiculous. Who's going to cook for me? Who's going to do the laundry? Can't you manage on your own for just a little while, Mark?" "Huh? I'm out there working and now you want me to do housework too? You're a monster," Mark huffed. But in my confusion, Mark sighed heavily. I get it. I should help out, right?" "Huh? Help out?" "That's what I'm saying. I'll assist with childcare. I'll handle the chores and childcare for the first month after birth, okay? That way, there's no need for you to go back to your mother's home, right?" "Well, I guess so."
Okay, then it's settled. I'll help out. This discussion's over. I understand. I wasn't entirely convinced, but the best thing for our family would be if we could work together to raise our child. I felt some apprehension, but I decided to trust Mark's words. I gave up the idea of going back to my mother's home and called my mom to explain the situation. I see. I was looking forward to your visit, so it's a bit disappointing. But it's a good thing, right? Mark said he'll help, hasn't he? That's true, but I thought it would be more reassuring with you, Mom, given your experience with childcare. Oh, there are plenty of couples who take on everything from the start without returning home. You should take advantage of Mark's support and try your best together. Okay, I understand. As I was about to hang up, my mother stopped me. Oh, and... What's up? Always tell me when something happens. I'm always on your side, Isabella. Thanks, Mom. I'll try my best with Mark. I needed to work hard to keep from worrying my mom, and so I resolved to take on childcare with my husband. A few days later, our first son was born, and the tumultuous life of parenting began. As promised, Mark did help out, albeit in a limited way. His involvement amounted to doing some light shopping after work and taking out the garbage, tasks I had managed. However, Mark was stubbornly hands-off when it came to childcare. He had never changed a diaper or even made a bottle. I was tired from the unfamiliarity of childcare and had no energy to complain. This kind of parenting life continued for about 2 months. One evening, after putting our son to bed and returning to the living room, Mark arrived home. I'm home. Welcome home. I'll start making dinner, so just wait a bit. What? At least keep something ready to heat up. You're not good at managing things, are you? Well, what can I do? Our little Chris just fell asleep. It's been 2 months and you still can't get him to sleep properly? Never mind. I'll go take a bath first. Have dinner ready by the time I'm out. With that, Mark left the room. What was that about? Who does he think he is? Why does he demand perfection from me when he doesn't contribute to childcare at all? My irritation built, and I wanted to throw something, but I couldn't wake up Chris, who had just fallen asleep. I held back my anger. 30 minutes later, without saying a word, Mark started eating his dinner right after he got out of the bath. As I stared at him, shocked by his behavior. Oh yeah, I have something to talk about. Mark stopped me. Talk? What all of a sudden? I got a call from Dad today. Seems Mom fell and can't move her leg well. What? Your mother? According to my husband Mark, his mother had gone shopping with a neighborhood friend, had a dramatic fall, and was immediately taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Even after several hours, her leg isn't moving and the doctor diagnosed that she might need assistance going forward. I see. That's hard. Your father must be having a rough time. To be honest, I was more worried about my father-in-law than my mother-in-law. From the beginning, my mother-in-law did not like me. She was even cold to me at our marriage introduction. When I announced my pregnancy, "We don't need a girl, do we?" she was the type to say nonchalantly. The one who always scolded my mother-in-law and stood by me was my father-in-law. Let me know if you need anything. I'll be there for you if you need me. Each time he met me, my father-in-law encouraged me like this. If my stay-at-home mother-in-law couldn't move, my father-in-law would be really struggling. While recalling the happenings at my in-laws' home, Mark dropped an unbelievable proposition. Here's the thing. I had a great idea. Let's live together with my parents at my home. What? Don't you think it's a good plan? I'm worried about Mom, and you, Isabella, are not working now. If we live together, it will reduce Dad's burden, and he would be happy. Wait just a minute. You're joking, right? The reason I'm not working is to take care of our son, Chris. I can't suddenly decide to live with your parents. But it's been 2 months already. You must have some free time now. Right now, Mom is the priority. You should understand that. Is he serious? When I suggested living near my mom, he outright refused. But now it suits him just perfectly. Mark is not the type to visit his home frequently, so it was convenient so far. But living with my mother-in-law is out of the question. Knowing Mark, if we lived together, he would certainly side with his mother and be harsh on me. Unable to bear it any longer, I vented my frustrations. Don't mess with me. You flat out denied when I wanted to live near my mother, but now it's okay when it's about you? What? What's that about? Your mother is fine, isn't she? But unlike your house, my mom lives alone. What if something happens? You're not considering my anxieties, are you? Shut up. Listen here. You married me and became my wife. You should stop arguing and listen to what I say. At that moment, any residual affection I had for my husband vanished instantly. He doesn't consider my feelings, let alone seeing me as an equal. I cannot continue a marital relationship with him. Seeing my silence, Mark probably thought I had agreed and dropped this line. Anyway, it's decided that we're going to live together. We're moving as soon as possible, so get the stuff packed by tomorrow. I understand. You should have just obediently listened to me from the start. With that, Mark left for the bedroom without even clearing the dinner dishes. The next day, once Mark left for work, I packed the minimum necessary stuff and left the house. Of course, just for me and my son. When I returned to my mother's house with my son, my mother was initially shocked, but accepted our situation once I explained. As he returned home from work, my husband, Mark, called after realizing that my son and I were not there. Hey, where are you right now? At my mother's place, Mark. What? What the heck are you doing without my permission? Get back here right now. Well, our son's already asleep, and it's late. So no. Besides, I'm not planning on returning. What the? Mark yelled at me over the phone, something that was rare for me to oppose him. Listen here, if you don't come back right now, we're getting a divorce. You got it? A divorce? That's right. Didn't I tell you? I'm moving to my parents' house. If we divorce now, you'll be jobless. That's gonna be a problem for you, huh? I couldn't see his face, but I could tell from his tone of voice that he was smirking. To him, I responded coldly. I don't see that as a problem. What? I have no objections to the divorce. So please, send the divorce papers to the court. What are you saying? You're the one who's going to be in trouble if we get a divorce. Maybe he thought that if he provoked me with a blaming tone, I would listen to him. I was thoroughly disgusted by his naive thinking. If you want to move to your parents' house, go ahead. I won't. What? You think you could just do that? I don't need your permission. After all, we're getting a divorce. Why should I listen to what a stranger has to say? Who do you think you are talking like that? My patience with Mark, who still looked down on me, had reached its limit. Enough is enough. Who the hell do you think you are? How much more do you have to belittle someone before you're satisfied? I didn't get married to become your slave. Stop treating women like they're stupid. What's going on? Isabella, calm down. Calm down? I can't keep quiet after being belittled this much. If we can't support each other as a couple, then I don't need a man like you. Divorce? I'd be more than happy to. Live by yourself at your parents' house. Never involve me again. With that, I hung up the phone. Mark kept calling persistently, but I ignored all of them. Then he started to send me disturbingly affectionate texts. Isabella, I can't live without you. You don't have to live with my parents. Please come back. I understand. Let's live with your mother, just the three of us. 1 month later, his love messages abruptly stopped, and he unexpectedly agreed to the divorce. It was all thanks to my father-in-law. When Mark complained about the situation to him, he ended up getting scolded instead. Listen, Mark, you can't just impose the idea of living together on someone. But Dad! Oh, shut up. You need to learn more about the world, and that's why Isabella left you. It's pitiful. My stern father-in-law, after scolding my husband, instructed him to proceed with the divorce. My husband, unable to defy his father, grudgingly agreed to the divorce. I filed the divorce papers that were mailed to us, and we were officially no longer a couple. Afterwards, I received an apology from my father-in-law. Isabella, I'm truly sorry. My foolish son must have caused you trouble, hasn't he? It's all right, sir. It's all water under the bridge now. Live your life your way, Isabella, and thank you for everything. I can't express enough the gratitude to my father-in-law, who has shown nothing but respect until the end. The woman I am today is thanks to him. As for me, I'm in the thick of it, juggling work and motherhood as a single mom. With help from my mother, I strive daily to become a better mother for my son. Being married and being a couple doesn't guarantee happiness. I don't need a husband to be happy. Just having my beloved son and mother by my side is more than enough for me.
A wife slacking off is totally unacceptable. If you're going to take it easy, then just leave. Half joking, my mother-in-law poured beer over my head. Droplets of beer trickled down from my hair. In that moment, glaring at mother-in-law, I decided it was time to leave this place. My name is Emerson. I live with my husband Derek and our 10-year-old daughter Sandy. Our family life is generally peaceful, but that tranquility shatters whenever we visit my in-laws. Once a month, we drive 20 minutes to visit them, a family tradition. Their home is more rural than ours, and with fields for Sandy, who loves the countryside to play in, we make these monthly visits. But each visit brings me immense stress. It's the same old story. My mother-in-law goes out of her way to make life hard for me. When we visit, she'll drop all household chores to play with Sandy. I'm grateful she entertains Sandy, but the problem is she fills Sandy's head with bad things about me. Sandy is 10 now and is starting to realize what mother-in-law says isn't quite right, but it was much worse when she was younger. Sandy, tell Mommy I hate you, go away. Mommy will be really happy, mother-in-law told little Sandy. When I actually heard Sandy say, I hate you, go away, it was a shock. Both Derek and I were thrown into chaos after I broke down crying at home. When Derek asked Sandy, it came out that mother-in-law had been poisoning her against me. Though Derek and I protested strongly, mother-in-law didn't seem to care. I even told Derek I didn't want to visit them anymore, but he insisted we keep the monthly visits. Maybe because he's an only child, but more because he's a mama's boy. Derek, convinced that most of what his mother says is right, sometimes joins her in tormenting me, knowingly or unknowingly. When at their home, mother-in-law dumps all the housework on me, so I end up cooking. Cooking in someone else's kitchen is always challenging. And mother-in-law would chime in, why on earth did Derek marry such a slow woman? Sandy and I are starving. Derek would add, well, you are a bit slow, Emerson. You like to take your time, making me even angrier. In the car ride home, after confirming Sandy was asleep in the back seat, I confronted Derek. He responded, look, I know it's bad, but if I don't agree with Mom, she could say worse things. I'm doing this to protect you from further insults, which made me lose it. After that, I didn't say a word in the car, but that night I told Derek, if this continues, I'm considering divorce. Every time we visit the in-laws, Derek takes mother-in-law's side. I had enough. Derek had said sorry over and over, but he wasn't changing his ways. When I told him I was thinking of divorce, he looked genuinely surprised. You dislike it that much? He said casually. Of course I disliked it. Why do I have to do all the household chores whenever we visit your parents? They're your parents, but it's not my home. The only ones who help me out are Sandy and your dad. Sandy started helping me with the dishes and folding laundry when she got to elementary school. His mom didn't like it, but Sandy would say, it's tough on Mom, isn't it? And help anyway. It's a relief that Sandy turned out so well. What surprised me was that his dad helped. He's really reserved, and I never quite know what he's thinking. Whenever I'm tasked with vacuuming, he'll get up and do it. But he just stays quiet with a stern face when his wife talks bad about me. It's hard to know what he really feels. So, I asked Derek to say something about this, and he awkwardly said, "But it'll put Mom in a bad mood." If you keep prioritizing your mother, we're definitely getting a divorce. I can't take it anymore. Wait, I never want to divorce, Emerson. It's better for Sandy to have both parents, right? Please reconsider. Maybe you should be the one to reconsider. Who's more important, me or your mother? When I stared at Derek, he answered with a troubled voice. You and Sandy are the most important. After some thought, he broke the silence. Okay. I won't side with Mom anymore. I'll protect you, Emerson. Just give me a chance. I replied, I promise. I don't really want a divorce either, but I can't live with a husband who just watches his mom harass me. If he stops siding with her, I have no complaints about the rest of our married life. Soon enough, it was time to visit his parents again. This time, they're hosting a barbecue in the yard. Looking forward to it, Sandy? Wow, really? I love barbecue! Both Derek and Sandy were overjoyed. I get it for Sandy, she's a kid. But as for Derek, well, he's clearly enjoying himself because he's not the one doing the work. They have a barbecue every year, and I'm the one responsible for everything from setup to cooking. His dad helps, but it's mentally draining working alone with him. And then his mom will complain that the meat is overcooked and tough. It's all part of the package. For me, barbecues were never a source of joy. They were all about Derek enjoying the meat and vegetables. I expect you to be on my side tomorrow. You promised, remember? I got it. I'll help with the barbecue prep too. The night before visiting my in-laws, I reminded Derek, but wasn't holding my breath. If Derek won't change, then it's time to consider divorce. With that resolve, I went to my in-laws, and, to my surprise, Derek really did change. My mother-in-law told Derek, "You can just leave everything to Emerson," but Derek declined. "It's not right that Emerson does all the prep and cooking, Mom. You take care of Sandy, and I'll help out." Mother-in-law, who usually just played with Derek and Sandy while waiting for the barbecue, was taken aback by his words. Derek took over lifting the heavy stuff and even helped light the fire. "Thank you," I told him, to which he bashfully replied, "It's my fault for not helping out before." I had doubts if this change was just for today, but his words and expressions cleared those doubts. While Derek, my father-in-law, and I were preparing the barbecue, Sandy said, "I want to help too," and joined us. Mother-in-law, who was left alone, perhaps felt she couldn't just stand there doing nothing. Awkwardly, she brought a cloth from inside the house and started wiping the table clean. Maybe this means the hostility will end. Or so I thought. It might have been a mistake. As we prepared under the hot sun, I lost my balance while getting up from a squatting position. I almost fell but caught myself, and father-in-law, who saw it all, asked, "Are you okay?" "Sorry, the heat got to me," I responded. "Emerson, are you sure you're fine? Maybe you're getting heat stroke. Perhaps it's better to rest in the shade." Hearing our conversation, Derek voiced his concern. I was a bit surprised since I had never been allowed to rest at my in-laws, but this time I took Derek up on his offer. I sat on a chair he brought into the shade and took a deep breath. My head felt dizzy, and I probably did have heat stroke. While sipping on my sports drink, mother-in-law approached me. "Emerson, are you okay? I heard you weren't feeling well." "Thank you for your concern. I think I might have slight heat stroke." For mother-in-law to worry about me was something new. As surprised as I was by her sudden change in demeanor, my mother-in-law was beaming at me. Just moments ago, she was sulking, clearly not in a good mood. Now she was warmly smiling at me, which honestly felt unsettling. I thought maybe she'd turned a new leaf, just like Derek had, but I soon realized that wasn't the case. Mother-in-law pulled out a can of beer she'd been hiding behind her back and offered it to me. "Have a drink and cheer up. Nothing beats a cold beer on a hot day." I'd rather not drink alcohol right now. I had no idea if it was okay to drink alcohol when dealing with heat exhaustion, but I was definitely not in the mood for a beer. My refusal made mother-in-law's smile vanish, replaced by a creepy, angry grin. "You can't even drink a beer that your mother-in-law offers you? Why are you the only one feeling unwell when everyone else is fine? You're just slacking off, aren't you?" "I'm not slacking off. Maybe I didn't hydrate enough while preparing for the event, but heat exhaustion varies from person to person." Ignoring my protest, mother-in-law half-languidly popped open the can of beer. Before I knew it, she poured it over my head. "A daughter-in-law who slacks off is unacceptable. If you're going to take a break, then leave." Droplets of beer trickled down from my hair. I glared at mother-in-law, making up my mind to leave this place. "Fine, I'll go." Groggy from the heat, I used the wall to steady myself as I stood up. Just as I was about to storm off, father-in-law stepped in front of me. "Husband, Emerson was slacking off instead of helping. Please say something to her." As mother-in-law yelled, father-in-law spoke. Not to me, but to mother-in-law. "Are you out of your mind? Who throws beer at someone like that? Emerson wasn't slacking off. She got sick because she was working so hard on preparations." Both mother-in-law and I were taken aback as father-in-law's face turned red with anger. "I've wanted to stop you from bullying Emerson for a long time, but I didn't know what to say. Stop this childish nonsense right now. If anyone is leaving, it's you." Father-in-law then went off somewhere, and before I knew it, he came back with a towel for me. Mother-in-law stood there, stunned, as father-in-law told me, "You should go take a shower. Don't hesitate." "Why?" mother-in-law screamed. "I was bullied by my mother-in-law, too, back when she was alive. Why are you siding with Emerson now when you never stood up for me?" "My mom isn't the one causing trouble here." Father-in-law spoke in disbelief, referencing Derek's late grandmother. Derek's grandmother, or mother-in-law's mother-in-law, was said to be a gentle woman. Having been told by her own mother that she must serve her mother-in-law once married, mother-in-law did exactly that. She devoted herself to her mother-in-law. That's when it clicked why mother-in-law had the same expectation of me. "What's all the commotion? Oh my God, Emerson, are you okay?" Derek finally showed up and was shocked to see me covered in beer. At that point, father-in-law raised his voice. "Derek, you're also to blame. Sure, you've been working today, but leaving everything to Emerson is not fair. You've even sided with your mom to put Emerson down before. Protect your wife like a husband should." Yes, sir." Derek seemed stunned by his father's words, but quickly snapped out of it and took me to the bathroom to clean up. Since I hadn't brought a change of clothes, I borrowed one of Derek's old t-shirts and shorts. Still stunned about his father's outburst, Derek mumbled, I've never seen Dad talk so much." After showering and changing, I returned to the yard to find my in-laws grilling meat for the barbecue. Noticing my return, father-in-law told mother-in-law, "You need to apologize properly." Mother-in-law grudgingly said, "I'm sorry." Father-in-law also apologized to me. Although he struggled to find the right words, he said he had his share of responsibility for letting the harassment continue, and he seemed genuinely remorseful. I had thought father-in-law was a tough nut to crack, but he was actually concerned about me all along. While I was thanking father-in-law, mother-in-law handed me a plate of grilled meat and veggies. "Just sit down for today. Heat stroke is no joke. If you're not feeling well, feel free to go inside and cool down." I was surprised by mother-in-law's kind words, but quietly replied, "Thank you." I suppose mother-in-law had her own hardships when she was younger. Maybe that's why she assumed that mistreatment was a given, and it took father-in-law to break down that barrier. From that point on, mother-in-law became very kind to me and even lent me a dress she wore when she was younger. "This might not be the latest style, but wear this for your ride home." "This is super cute. Thank you." Mother-in-law gave me a gentle smile when I expressed joy at the retro-styled dress. Seeing that smile made me think that I could get along with mother-in-law from now on. My premonition was spot on. Ever since the barbecue incident, mother-in-law stopped mistreating me, and we've been able to live a peaceful life with the in-laws.
Hey, what's going on? This is not what we discussed. Quiet down. I don't want to drop out at my son's wedding. Well then, I won't come. This is an unthinkable incident that occurred at my brother-in-law's wedding. My name is Caroline. I'm a 30-year-old working housewife. I married my husband Steven 5 years ago. We're thinking it would be nice to have children at some point, but for now, we've decided to concentrate on our careers. I was raised in a single-mother household. My father passed away due to an illness when I was in elementary school. It turned out to be cancer. To pay for the high medical expenses, my mother worked tirelessly, and unfortunately, it took a toll on her health. Even after that, she kept working to raise me, but by the time I was in middle school, she could hardly work. Her health had seriously deteriorated, and she could only imagine to work part-time a few days a week. But my mother, who had lost her husband and had no other relatives, had no choice but to work to raise me. I wanted to go to high school, but the desire to help my mother was stronger, so I decided to work after graduating from middle school. However, when my homeroom teacher found out about this during a career guidance session, he naturally opposed my decision. "Caroline, it's going to be tough for you to start working right after middle school. The future options will be limited. At least, you should consider high school." "But I want to start working as soon as possible to ease the burden on my mom." "Caroline, there are scholarships available now, and you can go to night school or take correspondence courses while working during the day. There are many options, so think it over. I'll return this career guidance form to you, so please write at least 2 other career options besides getting a job, and hand it in within the week." I reluctantly took the form returned by my homeroom teacher and decided to research on the internet using my mother's cell phone when I got home. When I started typing in the search window, I saw search stories that my mother had probably looked up. High school scholarships, financial assistance for non-taxable households, high school welfare benefits. I was curious, so I decided to search for them. Then I found out that there are indeed scholarships and various other systems available, just as the teacher had said. And for households on welfare, it seems that money needed for school supplies and tuition fees are also provided. I might be able to go to high school without burdening my mom. I was not entirely uninterested in further studies to begin with, so I began to hope a little. I decided to compare each system and opened the search history. And below the pages I had searched, there was something incredible. There were histories of question and answer sites and city websites my mother had searched for. Search history showed signs of keyword searches for welfare application, conditions to receive welfare, what to do when denied welfare, and not allowed to apply for welfare. These search histories seemed like cries from my mother's heart to me. Perhaps my mother had researched for my sake, learned about welfare, but was turned down at the counter and couldn't receive an application. Seeing this, I just couldn't think or research about going to high school anymore. And then the weekend came. When my homeroom teacher asked me, "Have you thought about your career path?" I replied that I simply couldn't consider going to high school. As expected, my teacher looked dissatisfied. Though no further guidance came during that moment, my mother received a call from the school in the evening. After hearing the situation from my teacher, she confronted me. "Why are you thinking about getting a job? If it's about money, I'll figure something out. Please, just go to high school." I responded, "But Mom, you know you've been denied welfare, right? I know going to high school costs more than a scholarship can cover." "How did you know?" "I saw it when I borrowed your cell phone. Since Dad passed away, it's been just you and me. What am I supposed to do if something happens to you? Please don't push yourself anymore. I'll work once I graduate to make up for all the hard work I've put in." Tears streamed down my mother's cheeks at my words. The person who was probably the most worried about my education and our finances was my mother herself. Sobbing, she hugged me and kept repeating, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Thus, due to my strong will, I decided to work right after graduating from middle school instead of proceeding to high school. However, finding a job as a middle school graduate was very difficult, as most job postings required at least a high school or an associate's degree. Even if the job didn't require a certain level of education, an ordinary middle school graduate with no qualifications would likely be rejected during the paper screening process. Eventually, I ended up working part-time until 6 p.m. after graduating from middle school. One day, I was called in for a meeting by my boss, who proposed that I work as a full-time employee once I reached the age equivalent to a high school graduate. According to my boss, my diligent work ethic despite my young age had been noticed. There were some conditions to meet, but I gladly accepted the offer. Afterwards, I fulfilled the conditions set by my boss and was promoted to a full-time position in April of the year I turned 19. Despite many hardships, my life was sailing smoothly. It was around this time that I met my current husband, who I was introduced to as a business partner. We got closer through work meetings and began to discuss personal matters. He also lost his father in a traffic accident and was raised by a single mother, similar to my situation. We clicked instantly over our shared experiences, which eventually led to a relationship and marriage. When we went to meet his mother, she initially welcomed me, but turned hostile when she learned that I was a middle school graduate. "I can't believe you didn't even go to high school. We may be a single mother family, but I managed to send Steven and his brother Robert to high school and college. Even if it required scholarships, it was possible to attend high school. What was your mother doing?" "Mom, that's no way to talk. Our circumstances were due to an accident, and we also had compensation from the other party. Caroline's family has its own issues. It's not fair to compare like that." If you do your research and follow the proper procedures, there are many grants and supports available. No offense, but it makes me think either she had poor grades that prevented her from going to high school, or both mother and daughter are simply ignorant. Either way, she's no good as your wife. I can't approve of a marriage with such a woman. The harsh words I received had left me deeply frustrated. My brother-in-law, Robert, had mocked me incessantly for only having a middle school education, making acceptance by my husband's family seemingly impossible. Eventually, we defied their approval and got married, sort of eloping, and had a private ceremony. Given the circumstances surrounding our marriage, my husband and I found ourselves largely estranged from his family. Nothing improved over time. Our relationship was merely superficial, limited to basic greetings. Then, one day, we received a phone call from his family. "Hello, Stephen. Robert is getting married. They are planning a wedding ceremony, and we were wondering if you and Caroline could attend." Just like that? Out of the blue? What a turn of events. After treating Caroline so coldly all this time, you guys sure are feeling generous now, aren't you? I do apologize for that, but Robert's bride-to-be insists she wants blessings from all the family members. Please, for the sake of your mother. Stephen and I discussed it at length and decided that if this could be a chance to mend relations, we would attend the wedding as his mother wished. On the day of the ceremony, my husband was asked to come earlier than planned to help out, so we ended up going separately. Although they told me it was okay to arrive just in time for the start, I decided to go a bit earlier so I could greet my in-laws. However, when I arrived at Hotel A as instructed on the invitation, there was no sign of a wedding taking place, and there was no one else around just for a wedding. So I decided to ask the hotel staff, "Excuse me, I have this invitation for a wedding here?" The staff member gave me a puzzled look and said, "Could you please wait a moment?" and went to the back, leaving me to wait for a while. After waiting for a bit, the staff returned with a response I could not have anticipated. "I'm sorry, but there are no weddings scheduled at our hotel today." "What? But it clearly states this hotel's name, right here." I double-checked the invitation with the staff, but the hotel's name printed there was undoubtedly correct. Just then, my phone rang. It was Steven. "Caroline, where are you?" "I'm at the desk of Hotel A. Steven, where are you? They are telling me there's no wedding here today." "Why are you there? Didn't you get the call from my mom this morning? The schedule and venue have changed." "What? I didn't receive any such call from your mom." "No way." "Hold on, I'll get there as soon as possible. Where is it and when does it start?" "It's at the chapel in Hotel B. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes, but I don't think you can make it in time from there." The location Steven gave me was on the opposite side from Hotel A, past our home. The turn of events led me to believe this was his mother's doing. "Steven, can you hand the phone to your mom?" I decided to confront her directly over the phone. "Hello, Caroline. Why are you calling at a time like this? We're quite busy." "Don't play dumb. What's going on? I just got a call from Steven and the story doesn't match up. The time and location of the ceremony are totally different from what we were told. And you lied about contacting me. What are you trying to do?" "You're such a nuisance. Even if you're not the brightest, try to read the room a little. Your presence would spoil a special occasion like this, and it's embarrassing to have a dropout, so don't come." "Fine." Suppressing my frustration, I reached out to a certain person. Meanwhile, in the groom's waiting room at the wedding venue, Steven was having a heated argument with his mother and brother. "Mom, how can you say that to Caroline? And Robert, why was the content of the invitation sent to our house different from the others? Were you deceiving us from the start?" "Huh? What are you talking about? As long as you're here, everything will look fine. And it won't be a problem even if the dropout isn't here, right?" "Don't you dare! Stop belittling my wife any further." "Steven, Robert, both of you, stop it. This is right before the important ceremony." "Who do you think caused this massive bride harassment at this important ceremony?" At that moment, there was a knock on the waiting room door. Outside the door were Robert's bride-to-be and her parents. "I heard that you declined Caroline's attendance. Robert, can you explain why this has happened?" There's a reason for this. It's embarrassing, but my brother's wife only has a middle school education, so she's not the kind of person who should be here." "That's right. My eldest son's wife, Caroline, is a dropout. But my son went against my wishes and married her. She and her mother lack common sense and are a disgrace to our family. It's too embarrassing to invite such a daughter-in-law here." At the words of Robert and his mother, the bride covered her mouth with her hand, and her parents exchanged glances with clouded expressions. "Robert, even if it's true, there are things that are acceptable and things that are not acceptable in society." The bride's father said so, showing the screen of his smartphone. "What? How did you get a hold of that?" What the bride's father showed to everyone present was the image of the invitation sent from the in-laws to us. Actually, the bride's father is my former boss. Although he is no longer my direct boss due to a transfer, he was the one who did everything he could to help me get promoted, and I owe him a lot. Also, the bride had once worked part-time at my workplace, so I was acquainted with her. "It seems that you and your son have a misunderstanding. My daughter and I know Caroline very well, and she's not the person you describe. She was a child who struggled with her family environment, but she's always been a dutiful daughter who loves her mother. She never forgets to be considerate to those below her, and she took good care of my daughter when she was working part-time for work experience." "What? But..." As Robert stammered, this time the bride spoke. "What my father says is true. When I was in high school, I used to work part-time at his office. Being young and naive, I wasn't well liked by my coworkers. But Caroline always stood up for me. She also helped me when I was being bothered by a difficult customer, and she always took the time to explain things that I didn't understand at work. My father and I are truly grateful to Caroline, and to think that someone would treat our benefactor in such a way. At the bride's words, her mother-in-law was shaking with anxiety. She began to shout, obviously at the end of her patience. Well, education is important, isn't it? I made sure my sons were well educated, so I wouldn't be ashamed to introduce them anywhere. Even made sure they graduated from college. And in this day and age, to only have a middle school education? Unless there's a very good reason, it's expected to at least graduate from high school. If they can't do that, it's simply a lack of effort on the part of both the individual and the parents. There was indeed a very good reason. At least for Caroline and her parents. And she, having joined the workforce right after middle school, worked hard. Didn't you hear from Caroline herself? She acquired her high school equivalency diploma as part of the requirements for her promotion. Actually, I took a high school equivalency exam as a requirement to be promoted to a full-time position. The exam covered the content equivalent to 3 years of middle school and 1 year of high school. As I had been away from academic studies, I had forgotten even some of the things I had learned. I studied between work and after returning home, sometimes getting help from others, and somehow managed to prepare in time for the exam. The content was mostly basic, and I passed with flying colors. A high school equivalency exam is a national examination, and passing it means the government recognizes you as having the same level of academic abilities as a high school graduate. Can you please stop referring to Caroline as a dropout from now on? It's unpleasant. And I can't possibly allow my precious daughter to marry into such a horrible, abusive family. It's fortunate that the wedding reception and the registration of the marriage haven't happened yet. We'd like to pretend this wedding never existed. Meanwhile, at the wedding venue, unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes, the guests were anxiously waiting for the reception to start. However, as time passed with no sign of the ceremony beginning, the venue staff began to hurry about. An uneasy atmosphere began to spread, and the guests started to feel suspicious. Then, a solemn voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Unfortunately, the wedding scheduled for today has been cancelled due to unavoidable circumstances. The bride's father has a message for you." "I'm the bride's father, as introduced. Despite your efforts to adjust the schedule for today's occasion, I deeply apologize for the sudden turn of events, and I am sorry to inform you that due to the discovery of malicious harassment from the groom's side, the marriage has been called off. I take full responsibility for not noticing this until now. The reception has been cancelled, and we will proceed with a simple dinner. All the wedding gifts will be returned, so please be assured. I am terribly sorry for the inconvenience." After finishing his speech, he bowed deeply. "How dare you! I was looking forward to this day so much!" The discontented mother-in-law stormed the venue, causing a commotion, but was restrained by the staff and dragged off to a side room. The guests left at the reception venue found themselves in an awkward predicament. Some, in a spirit of might as well, carried on with their meals, while others, made uncomfortable or feeling unwell by the incident, decided to leave. Stephen, being a member of the family, went around apologizing to the guests and thanking the bride's father before heading home early. This debacle was caused by Stephen's family and resulted in a broken engagement. As a result, Robert and the rest of his family decided to cover all the costs, including the reception fee, the transportation costs for the guests, and an additional compensation for the bride's side. Due to this incident, my mother-in-law started receiving judgmental looks from relatives. Robert, who had invited his colleagues to the wedding, also found his standing at work had deteriorated. When we got home, my husband apologized to me repeatedly. "Caroline, I'm really sorry about my family's behavior," he said. "It's okay. It's not your fault, Stephen. I want to make things right. I've decided to cut all ties with my family over this incident. I'm utterly disgusted. We live quite close to my mom's house, so how about we move closer to your mom and start over in a new place? If it's okay with you. We could live with your mom." "Really? Thank you, Stephen." I agreed to Stephen's proposal, and we started to live with my mother. Our interactions with the bride's family have resumed, surprisingly in a pleasant way. All thanks to that chaotic reception. Life is unpredictable, isn't it?
Everything is going well as planned.
I heard my husband's voice from the living room when I went home to get something I had forgotten. If all goes well, our daughter-in-law will soon be out of the picture, haha. I also heard my mother-in-law chiming in. It was shocking to realize they had been harboring such hatred against me, to the point of planning my demise after all the time we had spent living together. Under normal circumstances, I might have confronted my husband and mother-in-law right there, but due to my profession, I chose not to. That day marked the start of my struggle to expose their malevolent actions. My name is Michelle Kimball. My husband Dave, who is 3 years my senior, and I got married 3 years ago. Our paths crossed at a traffic safety class held at Dave's workplace. At that time, I was a police officer working for the traffic department. As it was my first traffic safety class, and as I am not particularly good at public speaking, I was quite nervous. Dave was the one who helped me out then. We struck up a friendship after that, thanks to the memorable conversation he initiated to help ease my nervousness. Years have passed since our wedding, but we still do not have any children. I had always wanted a child soon after getting married, but Dave was not particularly enthusiastic about it.
Child rearing is costly. We need to save up a bit more,
he would say. Despite us both having jobs and not facing financial instability, he always dodged conversations about having a child. And I am not the only one bothered by our childless state. My mother-in-law, Judy, was also constantly worried about us not having a child. In the beginning, she was hopeful for a grandchild, but as 3 years passed, she seemed to think that I was the one rejecting the idea of having a child. Michelle, you're not young. You better get a move on. If a woman can't bear her husband's child, she's no different from a maid. I am not intentionally not having a child. When I relayed what Judy said to Dave, he would always get grumpy.
What? Are you trying to say that I'm at fault here? I'm tired from work and you're just adding to it. If you really want a kid, why don't you try harder?
He would always start criticizing my appearance in detail. Furthermore, his preference is the flamboyant fashion of young girls, something that is not quite suitable for a woman nearing her 30s like me. I've told him countless times that I can't dress up too much due to my job requiring sudden call-outs, but he just doesn't seem to understand.
A wife who doesn't take care of her appearance is a failure as a woman. Reflect on yourself before complaining to me.
I regretted my decision to marry him, as I hadn't known that the once kind-hearted Dave could have such a nasty mindset. 2 years after our marriage, my division at work changed, and so did my work schedule. As our days off rarely matched, we gradually spent less and less time together as a couple. Despite struggling to synchronize our days off, Dave would casually schedule something else. You're bailing on me again? We planned to go to the movies together since last week.
Sorry, I was suddenly invited to go fishing with some girls from work yesterday. They said they were scared to bait the hook and they needed me. Sorry, but this is part of my job too.
While he voices words of reflection, his expression is smirking. Because of my husband, who goes off to have fun on his own accord, all of my anticipated plans were consistently betrayed. Even when I'm feeling lousy and just want to enjoy a quiet day at home, my mother-in-law always seems to show up unannounced. Oh, where's Dave? He's gone fishing. Apparently some girl asked him to go. Well, I suppose he'd rather play with other girls than be with you. I don't want to deal with my mother-in-law who says such things without any consideration for my feelings, but I can't just ignore her and go out. So this is how my weekends disappear, listening to her snide remarks. You two really don't seem like you're going to have kids. You should be more proactive. You're the wife, right? I'm trying my best, but Dave doesn't seem very enthusiastic about it because of money issues. Money? So how much are you earning now? Even though she asked me, I hesitated to disclose such private information to my mother-in-law. Reluctantly, I told her a slightly lower figure than what I actually earn, and she smirked, seemingly disappointed. Oh, compared to what I expected, it's quite less. Well, I'm just a public servant after all. You want a child even though you're on such a low wage. How can you even say that? What is she comparing with, I wonder? I'd appreciate it if she wouldn't compare a public servant to some rich person, but something about my mother-in-law's demeanor at this time bothered me. And this doubt was just the prologue to the story that was about to unfold. From that day, my mother-in-law started openly harassing me. She started visiting more often, almost half the days of the week. Once, when I came home from work, she had let herself in with a spare key and was conspicuously cooking dinner. Oh, you prioritize work over home, even though you're a housewife. Women without children really do have it easy. Maybe because I have to eat meals full of her nasty remarks, I always feel sick afterwards. And then there are times when she rudely wakes me up when I'm sleeping until noon after a night shift. How long are you going to sleep? You're disqualified as a wife if you sleep until noon because of a job you chose. No wonder men want to have other women. I was being forced to eat breakfast no matter how much I protested. Gradually, everything I ate started to lose its flavor, sometimes even tasting bitter. This went on for over a month, and with the stress and lack of sleep, I became so fatigued that even eating at home resulted in a run to the bathroom. Seeing my wary face, instead of showing concern, Dave made it obvious that he was annoyed.
You look so downcast all the time, it brings me down too. You've handed all the housework over to Mom. At least try to look cheerful, he'd say.
My mother-in-law always comes and nitpicks whenever I'm too busy to do the housework. You've noticed that, right? But despite my words, Dave would just ignore me and watch TV. He wouldn't listen to me, but he would laugh at the trivial talk that celebrities were having on TV, which made me explode with frustration. Dave, you've stopped making eye contact and talking to me recently. You even started canceling plans with me on your days off. Are you having an affair?
An affair? What an accusation.
At my words, Dave suddenly raised his voice.
I have work obligations. It's easy for you to say without knowing the hardships. Or are you feeling this way because you're the one having an affair?
He suddenly erupted, his face turning beet red. I was so taken aback by his outburst that I couldn't say anything in response. Moreover, Dave lashed out and smashed a vase that was on the table, the shards scattering all the way to my feet. That's way too much, even for you, I said. But for the first time, I felt scared of my husband. Since then, things like that kept happening over and over again, making me restless even when I was just at home. One day, due to work circumstances, I had to be away from home for a few days. On the day of my business trip, I left the house but realized I had left my important planner at the front door. I rushed back home to retrieve it. But the day before, we had a fight over his comment,
"Must be nice going on a trip without doing any housework,"
so I felt awkward about seeing him again. So when I returned home, I quietly opened the front door. And there were Judy's shoes. Not wanting to see my mother-in-law either, I gently picked up my planner from the shoe cabinet and was about to leave when I overheard their conversation.
"We've got everything we need. Everything's going as planned."
"She'll be pushing daisies soon, ha ha ha."
"Yeah, but the effects are not showing up as expected."
"She's been rushing to the toilet every meal. It should be soon, right?" I couldn't believe my ears at their chilling talk. What on earth? Quickly, I took out the voice recorder I always carry and started recording. Unaware that they were being recorded, the two in the room were cheerfully discussing their outrageous plan.
"Maybe we should increase the life insurance payout. That should be enough to pay off Mom's debt, right?"
"That would help. You wouldn't have to see her ugly face every day." I was so shocked I caught my breath. I can't believe they're thinking of such things, even if they don't like me. Furthermore, I heard them laughing disdainfully, saying, "Even if we tell the cops, the traffic cop won't suspect a thing." Gradually, anger overwhelmed my sadness, and I vowed to take revenge on them. After that, I spent time on the business trip pondering on how to get back at my husband. Perhaps due to my gloomy demeanor, my colleagues expressed their concern, and I ended up venting to them. That's when I heard an unexpected piece of information from one of them. Apparently, a little while ago, there was a call about a drunk causing a ruckus in a gentleman's club. When they rushed to the scene, the man causing the disturbance was none other than Dave. He was someone who had attended our wedding, so they immediately recognized his face.
"She's my girlfriend. Anyone who touches her gets a punch."
Dave had held one of the female employees of the club tightly, causing a scene by kicking tables and causing a ruckus as he pleased. Moreover, it wasn't just a drunken declaration. It seemed like they were genuinely in a relationship. I knew he was cheating. Somehow, all of my husband's past actions suddenly made sense. Surprisingly, I didn't feel much shock. Rather, I felt energized to thoroughly investigate my husband's infidelity. Watch out, I won't let this go as it is. A week later, suddenly, my husband started speaking to me in a gentle tone, as he did when we first started dating. Suspicious that he must have some ulterior motive, he presented me with a document.
"Michelle, you always do such a dangerous job with the police, and that's amazing. I'm proud as a husband, but I can't help but worry. However, it would be problematic if something were to happen, or if you were to become the target of a grudge."
To my surprise, it was an application form for life insurance. I was convinced that he was planning to implement their plan. Still, I wanted to believe in Dave one last time. "Do you really think so? Am I at risk of being targeted? If that happens, would you worry about me, Dave?" I stared straight into his eyes. Please reconsider, I pleaded, but my husband nodded with a broad smile. Of course, that's why. Sign this application form quickly. I wonder if all he sees in me now is the life insurance payout he would get in exchange for my life. He's a good-for-nothing man to the end, but thanks to him, I felt that I could carry out my punishment without any reservations. Well, in this world, you never know who might be out to get you.
That's right. There are so many dangerous incidents these days.
For example, having a family member with a foolish idea.
Oh, yeah.
Like planning to get rid of a nuisance wife to be with a young mistress. Dave was clearly disturbed, his eyes darting around nervously. Being instigated by a debt-ridden mother to send the daughter-in-law to the other world with a large life insurance policy.
What? Wait a minute, are you?
I played the recording from the voice recorder in front of my husband. Out from it came my mother-in-law's conversation and crude laughter, distorting my husband's face grotesquely.
Hey, how did you get this recording?
I happened to overhear it. It was a good thing I was carrying a voice recorder. If I'd always been a traffic cop, I wouldn't carry one around.
Aren't you still in the traffic department?
I'm in the detective division now. I told you, didn't I? Well, I guess you weren't listening since you were too preoccupied with a certain woman. I confronted my husband Dave with photos of his affair that he had hidden in his room. These were all undeniable evidences I found while rummaging through our house when he wasn't around.
What? I don't know anything about these photos. I don't even know this woman.
Oh, really? She seems to be a girl working in a high-end nightclub. You don't know her? The club where you got drunk and caused a scene? Apparently, you were shouting that she was your woman. How charming.
How much do you even know?
Well, I wonder how much, haha. Cornered, Dave desperately began to make excuses, not caring about appearances anymore.
It's all my mom's fault. After she heard about me dating the nightclub girl, she started saying that I should marry her instead of you who earns less. She was the one who tempted me.
I see. Dave's words made sense to me. When my mother-in-law Judy heard about my salary and called it low, she must have been comparing it to Dave's mistress. According to the conversations I recorded with a voice recorder, Judy had a substantial amount of debt. It's foolish to think that they were planning to use my life insurance payout and the nightclub girl's income to pay off that debt. So, you're saying the plan came from your mom?
Yes, so I'm not to blame.
What are you talking about? The whole thing started because you had an affair in the first place. It's despicable to blame others. I'll never forgive you. As I yelled, Dave suddenly let out an incomprehensible scream and grabbed my collar. But I quickly grabbed his hand and threw him onto the floor. I'm a police officer, Dave. I'm used to dealing with violent men like you. I can protect myself without life insurance. In front of Dave, who was groaning in pain from hitting his back, I took out my handcuffs. You're under arrest.
That's a joke, right?
Seeing the handcuffs, Dave suddenly became weak and started apologizing.
I'm sorry. It was just a moment of weakness. Please forgive me.
Save your excuses for the police station. I'll listen to them thoroughly when the time comes. Eventually, Dave and Judy were imprisoned for a while for their plot to make me an outcast. I divorced Dave and sued both him and his mistress for $20,000 in emotional damages. They might be released soon as it was an attempted crime, but with Dave losing his job, having to pay the emotional damages and Judy's debt, they will undoubtedly face a tough life. Meanwhile, I'm thoroughly enjoying living alone for the first time in years. Having been forced to live a cramped life for so long, I decided to spread my wings for a while.